The offseason is mostly complete at this point. Kansas City still has a couple of things that they're probably going to do before the draft, but it is moving on to draft season, and that is what we're going to be looking at. What has Kansas City done so far this year, and what can they still do before the draft starts in just a little over a month? Today on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Hey, Chiefs Kingdom, welcome back for another episode of Locked On Chiefs, your daily podcast covering the Kansas City Chiefs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. We are here 5 days a week. Thank you for everything that you do and for always watching and listening. We really do appreciate it. Thank you for making Locked On Chiefs your first listen of the day. Don't forget, we're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube as well. Go check out another show, whether it's Locked On NFL. It's actually getting covered twice a day right now with Locked On NFL. You can also check out Locked On NFL Draft. Lots of information coming out when we start talking about and looking at the NFL Draft. I'm Chris Clark. You can find me at Chiefs Corner on Substack, and I'm Chris Clark NFL on X. Lots to talk about when we start looking about how this is going to play out for Kansas City. Obviously, the offseason is mostly done. They've signed most of the free agents that they're going to. They've tendered the guys that they're going to. There's going to be much more that you can go find over at KC Chiefs Corner, so be sure to go check that out. And thank you all to our locos that are subscribed to our text line. When news breaks, we will be getting information out there first, and we will then have it covered on the show. When we start looking at what Kansas City accomplished this offseason, the big question was, can they fix the left tackle position? I will say that I don't know that it's 1,000% fixed, but I do think that they got a guy that they believe can step in and be a starter and be effective for them in day one. Obviously that is Jaylon Moore. So I do think that was a great pickup by Kansas City. They have addressed that position. They franchised Trey Smith. So they took care of their right guard. They've got their left tackle. The question is left guard. The thought process right now is that it's going to be Kingsley Suamataia is going to be the first man up and given the opportunity to win that position. You still have Hunter Norzad from last year in the draft. And obviously you still have Mike Caliendo that could also play into that position, and Chiefs could go out and draft somebody. So we'll see how that works out. Wanya Morris is still here, could fill out the backup tackle role. Maybe he could be challenging for that left guard position. But I think that you have to feel pretty good that they got the biggest need addressed with this team, which is the left tackle position. So at this point, now you're in a situation where, okay, you're adding players. What have you added? You added Jerry Tillery, interior defensive line. That's definitely something that this team needs. They need more defensive tackles. Tillery was a former first-round pick. This is a perfect Brett Veach type pickup. They got him. We don't have full contract numbers out on him yet, but he is going to be somebody that could come in and help you with the interior of the defensive line. You re-signed Mike Pennell. That hasn't been something that we've talked about much yet, but I think that that's a great addition. He can step in and he can be a starter. Not the guy that you want as a starter next to Chris Jones, but he can be a starter. He can help you stop the run. He doesn't give you a ton in pass rush, but at least gives you a veteran there that you know you can trust, and he can help this Chiefs interior defensive line. You also added a guy in Christian Fulton, who is going to step in and be a starter at corner day one. His 2-year deal for $20 million with $15 million guaranteed assures that they look at him as being one of the starters next to Trent McDuffie. Obviously, when the third corner comes on the field, it looks like it's probably going to be Jaylon Watson. At this point, I do think that that's probably what the Chiefs are going to be looking at. Is it'll be Jaylon Watson on the outside with Christian Fulton, and Trent McDuffie will move inside. That is the way I kind of see it. They got a deal done with Charles Omenihu as well. They bring him back at the defensive end position. I think this is huge for Kansas City. It adds to their pass rush. It gives them the ability to bet on a player and see if he can come back from what he was able to do in his career before Kansas City, because obviously his first year he missed the first 6 games. He did come out and performed well in the second part of the season for Kansas City, so that was great. Then he tears his ACL and misses pretty much the entire first couple of months of the season in 2024. He is back on another prove-it deal, trying to get a big deal at in 2026. We'll see if that works out for him. Don't have the full contract numbers yet on Charles Omenihu, but it is a 1-year deal worth up to $7 million. So I'd imagine it's probably closer, maybe 2 to 3 guaranteed. And you're sitting there probably looking at 3 or 4, maybe 5 in incentives. Just really depends. And since he didn't play most of the season last year, if it's based on snap count and it's based on sacks, incentives could be very easy for him to hit, but not count against the salary cap because he didn't play a full season. So definitely something to take advantage of there. And I think Kansas City is in a great position when you start looking at the defensive end position. Yes, they could still add talent in the draft, but right now I think that they look like they're in a pretty good area with their defensive ends. When you start looking at the linebacker level, you brought back Nick Bolton. You gave him a 3-year deal worth $15 million a year. That'll be something to watch, see how he is able to perform. He's got a total of $30 million guaranteed basically in the first 2 seasons. So at that point, you're really looking at a matter of, can he perform at that $15 million a year level, because he is getting paid like one of the top linebackers in the NFL. They returned starters in Drew Tranquill and Leo Chanel, so that's going to help. I do think that that's something that Kansas City is going to be in a good position when you start looking at how that's going to work out. So at that point, we've already talked about corner. We've already talked about defensive end, defensive tackle. That's what they've done. They haven't done anything at the safety position, so I would look at something. I'd look at that as something that they're probably going to look at in the draft, because I do think that they feel like they would need to add a safety there. Flip back over to the offensive side. They got their backup quarterback in Gardner Minshew. I think that that's a great signing for them. Very cheap. Will be one of those things. Still don't have the full numbers on that yet, but it should be something that is going to be basically vet minimum, since he already has money still due from the Raiders at this point. Brought back Marquise Brown or Hollywood Brown. That's a great move for Kansas City. Adds a veteran to the wide receiver room. He gets to bet on himself again. It's basically the same contract he signed last year. He's hoping to get a payday in 2026 if he's able to perform and stay healthy in 2025. So that's the type of deal that you want to do for those kinds of players. You still have Rashee Rice coming back from his injury and likely a suspension in the start of the season. You have Xavier Worthy, who is going to be back and look better, I think, in 2025 after a good rookie year in 2024. Tight end is a position that you didn't really do much at. You brought in Robert Tonyan. I don't think that that's going to move the needle at all. Obviously Travis Kelce's back, so that's going to help. But the question is there going to be something that you're going to be able to do in the draft that's going to improve that position? I don't know that they will, because don't forget they have Jared Wiley coming back from injury. That's going to be something that I think is going to be able to help this room. But again, that's a position that I think that they could be looking to maybe add somebody in the draft if somebody falls to them in the first couple of rounds. I don't think that they'll add somebody later on, because I don't think that the value will be there at that specific position. Offensive line-wise, I think you feel pretty good. You have your left tackle, at least for this season. You have center taken care of. You have right guard taken care of. I do expect they'll get a deal done with Trey Smith, so I think he's going to be here long term. And you have your right tackle for at least this season, and then you have a question at left guard. I think Suamataia is going to slide in there. Maybe Wanya Morris. We'll see if that ends up happening. But you probably could be addressing the left tackle position, as I talked about in the mock draft Monday. If you didn't check that out, go check that out. That was a fun one to do. Looking forward to doing more of those in the future. Kansas City has a lot of different options of where they can go, because they left themselves in a position where they don't have to go any specific direction. That's a great place to be, and it's perfect for this team at this juncture. Much more to come. We're going to talk about what the caps looks like right now and what it could mean for what Kansas City is still going to be trying to get done as we move on into the NFL draft in the next couple of weeks. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets, and much, much more on FanDuel. I've got my eye on a few underdogs this year, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them with the spreads, totals, and game props you want to know. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. There is no waiting around. I can use that money for whatever I want immediately. It is fantastic. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. So when we start looking at the salary cap, Kansas City as of right now is still around 15 million. That's what is being reported. That's what we have contract numbers on. That doesn't take into account Charles Omenihu. We don't have that number. That doesn't take into account Gardner Minshew. But I don't think Minshew is going to be a guy that is going to take up much of the salary cap space for Kansas City because, again, the Raiders still owe him about $3 million. So I would imagine that his deal in Kansas City is going to be vet min. Which is only going to add maybe a couple $100,000 to the salary cap right now since it's just doing the top 51. Charles Omenihu, we don't know those numbers. 1 million or 1 year, up to 7 million. Again, probably a 2 to 3 million, maybe 4 at most, I would imagine, would be his salary cap number for 2025. So that'll take, depending on how much it is, if it's up to $4 million that it counts against the salary cap, then you're going to lose probably about 3 based on where they are salary cap wise right now. Other guys that we don't really have the numbers for, Mike Pennell just signed a 1-year deal. Again, not going to be something that's going to affect the salary cap too much. Juju Smith-Schuster just signed a 1-year deal. Kareem Hunt and Marlon Tuipulotu as well also signed a 1-year deal and don't have those contract details. If they're vet min deals, they're only going to add a couple $100,000 to the salary cap for each one of them because it's going to knock one of the guys down below off. So I would imagine that between those 4, based on who they are and where they are in their career, maybe you're going to lose $1 million, maybe $1.5 million with those 4 being added to the Chiefs salary cap when it is. Jerry Tillery is the other one that we don't have specific contract numbers for. That's another one that got done, and it just hasn't been released yet. So Kansas City more than likely is probably down to, I would say, somewhere around 11, 12 million, maybe 9 or 10. Just really depends on what they did with the Omenihu, what they were able to get done there. I do think that they're mostly done for the offseason. I do think that they're not going to be looking to make any other moves. Maybe they add a veteran at vet min. Maybe they add somebody. But at this point, I think that their moves are pretty much done because you also have to take into account the numbers that are still coming in for, like, Najee Johnson's at $3.2 million this year. Mike Caliendo just signed a deal. He's in there for $1 million this year. You have Ariza coming back for $960,000. Najee Johnson and Jack Cochran both got restricted free agent deals. So those are about $3.2 million a piece. Obviously, those are counting against the salary cap already at this point. They may not be fully signed, but they are out there and they are expected to be signed. So at this point, they count against the Chiefs salary cap. So Kansas City is in a position where I think you look at what they have on their salary cap. They have probably, I'd say, anywhere between 8 to maybe 12 at most million based on how the salary cap is done this year, or based on how the salary cap is functioning at this time of year. What does that mean for what they're going to be able to do for the rest of the offseason? What's it mean for what they're going to be able to do for the year? The reason I don't think they're going to make any other big moves is because you have a situation where you need probably, I'd say, at least $3 or $4 million to eat up the bottom part of the roster on this. When you start looking at who is going to be on there, when you start talking about, you have to have 69 players at least on your roster in September. So I think that it's going to cost you another $3 to $4 million because you have all the guys on the practice squad, plus you have the additional 2 or 3 guys that are going to be on the roster, or 2 guys right now because it's just top 51. So that gets you to 53. Plus you have any guys that end up on injured reserve. So I would imagine that you're looking probably at the 3 to 4, maybe $5 million that's going to be coming off the salary cap. So Kansas City is probably really closer to maybe $5 million in salary cap space when you start looking at it when it comes to where they are in September. They also need about $3 million for their draft picks at this point. So again, that takes you down to about an operating cap space of about $2 million. And this is all just stuff that I'm looking at based on the information that I have available now. Obviously, if they make a trade in the draft, that changes what it's going to cost them salary cap wise. So that's going to be something that you have to take into account. If they make any other signings, that'll have an effect on it. But the bigger thing that's really going to affect it, and that's going to cause Kansas City to be able to do more things and maybe extend more players, is getting a deal done with Trey Smith. I do think that they get one done. I just don't know if it's going to be something that's going to get done before the NFL draft. If it did, they could be in a great position because at this point, you don't have a glaring weakness. Do you have needs? You absolutely have needs at defensive tackle. I still think that you could say that left tackle is in need. So if you have the ability to get a Trey Smith deal done now, get it done before the draft, know exactly what your cap space is, and have an idea, okay, this is what we think it's going to cost us. And you don't have to have it exact, but get an idea of what you think it's going to cost for the rest of getting all your guys signed and getting them under contract in September. And then you can back into, okay, what do we have left available? What do we need to give Smith in the upfront money that can eat up some of the salary cap space that he's going to save by signing a long-term deal? All of that is going to play into it. They have the ability to create probably at least $15 million. I would say, well, $13 to $15 million. I would say I'd put it in that range is what they could create with Trey Smith pretty easily. I don't know that they will create that much. If they front load it, it's smart because it helps them manage the salary cap for him in the future. If they don't front load it and they back load it like they normally do with most of their contracts, it's going to make it a little bit harder in the coming years. But it's something that could signal them looking at making a trade in the draft. If they can go find a veteran that they want to make a trade for using one of their draft picks, that's possible with this type of move, getting Trey Smith done before the NFL draft. So something to watch there. I'll be curious to see if they can get that done and what that deal turns out to be. If we do get that information, obviously we'll have it covered and you will get it here on Locked On Chiefs. A little bit more to talk about when we start looking at who is still out there. Who could Kansas City still potentially bring in? Who is still out there from their own free agent list coming up right after this? All right, so looking at what Kansas City has left, who is still out there that they have not signed or has not signed with another team for the Chiefs? DJ Humphries is still sitting out there at left tackle. Is it possible that they bring him back in on a cheap deal? I would say it's possible. I wouldn't expect it considering they signed Jaylon Moore. And Humphries is going to want to start and get a chance to get another contract next year. So I wouldn't imagine that's going to happen. Carson Wentz is still sitting out there. I can't imagine that he's going to be back in Kansas City. Would have thought that he would have signed a deal at this point from somebody, but he is not going to be back in Kansas City. Nicole Hardman is still sitting out there, Peyton Hendershot and Jody Fortson. All three of those guys are possibilities of bringing them back. Jody Fortson now is 30 years old, which is crazy to me because I remember him coming out as a rookie and I remember seeing him at training camp and talking about it on this show and actually having him on this show way back when. So it is crazy to me that he is 30 years old. He is an unrestricted free agent, as is Mecole Hardman. Neither of them have gotten offers from other teams that I know of. It would not shock me to see either of those guys back, especially when you're just talking about vetman deals for camp at this point. It's not going to cost a lot of money and gives you a chance to see if they have anything left. Hendershot's another one that it wouldn't shock me. He's a restricted free agent, so Kansas City had the first option. They didn't offer him a contract. I think the cheapest would have been around $3.2 million. They didn't want to go that direction, so they are allowing him to test the market. He could be back on a vetman type deal as well, just to give you kind of another tight end in that room and to see, if he is able to give you something for next season. So then we start looking at what is left out in the free agent market right now in 2025. You have, I'm not going to bother with the QB position. Kansas City, I think, is pretty set at that. 4 deep at QBs between Bailey Zappi, Olodokun, and Minshew and Mahomes. So I don't think that that's going to be something they'll look at. Running back wouldn't make a ton of sense to me either. With bringing back Kareem Hunt and bringing in Elijah Mitchell and already having Isaiah Pacheco plus Carson Steele, I don't think that they'll be looking at the free agent market. Although it is interesting that you do have some names out there that I'm a little surprised on. Mostert, which is, it's not too surprising he's out there, but he's 33 years old. The one that really sticks out to me, though, is Nick Chubb. I don't think Kansas City is going to get a deal done with Nick Chubb. I don't think that they're trying, but it is a name out there that I'm kind of surprised is still out there at this moment. He is coming off a bad season last year, and he's 30 years old, so he's a running back. So that could be why he's still sitting out there, and maybe he won't get a deal until after the NFL draft, which would also make a lot of sense. Don't think that they're going to be looking at the fullback market. Although old friend Michael Burton is still sitting out there, I think they're probably pretty happy with what they have in Carson Steele. Wide receiver is where it gets a little bit interesting. You start looking at this Chiefs class or this Chiefs roster, and you start looking at what they have on the roster. You have Hollywood Brown. You have Xavier Worthy, you have Rashee Rice, you have Juju Smith-Schuster, and I think those are your top four. And Juju is a really good fourth wide receiver that can step in and know his role and perform for you. It's the guys after that, and it's Nico Remigio, who is probably your returner. But you start looking at this list, there's a lot of guys on here that played last year at decent amounts. You have Stephon Diggs at the top end, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, Deontay Johnson, Tyler Lockett. All those guys are still sitting out there. I don't think Kansas City makes a move for any of those guys. I do think that they are still, maybe looking at this list in the wide receivers that are still sitting out there, and maybe they would take a chance on somebody that is maybe a younger wide receiver that's maybe an Anthony Schwartz. Just looking at names on this list to throw out there. Grant DuBose is another one that is still sitting out there as an undrafted, is a exclusive rights free agent, didn't make it with the Dolphins. But those are some of the younger guys. When you start looking at this roster, it's going to be a question of, or when you start looking at the position and who's out there, it's a question of, is there young guys that you want to bring in and give them a chance, especially just to see if they have the ability to add something this season? Because I think your top four are probably set, and you could still be looking to add more in the draft. So to me, it's more of a situation of, do you look at the young guys that are sitting out there? Terrace Marshall Jr. is still sitting out there at 25 years old. Schwartz is 25. Grant DuBose is 24. Those are the types of guys still sitting out there. I don't really see any other names that are sticking out. Obviously, I talked about McCole Hardman earlier. Then you start getting to some of the guys that are more veteran-type wide receivers, Deontay Johnson, DJ Chark, those types of guys. Unless they want to go out and bring in somebody for specific roles, I don't see Kansas City going and picking up another free agent wide receiver. Tight end, still don't really think that there's anything that is out here Peyton Hendershot, Irv Smith Jr. is still out there as well. I don't see any names here that really say that really make me think that Kansas City needs to go out and sign any of these guys. You already have three tight ends that you have to feel pretty good about with Travis Kelce, Noah Gray, and Wiley. I don't think you're moving on from him. So none of the guys that are out there right now are going to be coming in on bigger deals and helping them in 2025. I don't think so. I don't think that they're going to be going that direction. Left tackle, I wouldn't expect them to go at this point. Although there is still some interesting names out there with Jedrick Wills still sitting out there on the free agent market. Is it something that they could get a deal done, have more talent at that position? He's 26. That is a guy that if they were looking and trying to think that maybe that they want to continue to get more youth at that position, maybe they bring him in and they sign him if he's willing to take a cheap deal. But considering he's still out there, I would imagine he's wanting more money than teams are feeling like he is worth. Left guard, I don't really see any names that stick out to me that I would really consider. You're looking at a bunch of guys that are 28 or above that are still out there in the free agent market center. I'm not going to worry about. You still have your draft pick from last year, and I think that he can play that position. Right guard, I'm not really going to look at either, or right tackle. Interior defensive line is where I would say that the next list that I would really consider and look at. And let's see, maybe Fadukasi is out there. Maurice Hurst is out there. There's a couple of guys that I guess you could look at. Kyle Peko is out there. Jordan Phillips. But you're really starting to talk about guys that are a lot older. You have Calais Campbell, Linville Joseph. Those guys are over 35. But most of the other guys that are still sitting out there are going to be the older types. You only have a couple that are under age 27, and nothing that I think that really is going to change this roster for the 2025 season. When you look at edge, you have Sam Hubbard that's still sitting out there. You have Dwayne Smoots, Carl Lawson, Tano Passanio, old friend, is sitting out there. So is Emmanuel Ogba, Preston Smith, Zarius Smith, Matt Judon, Von Miller, Jerry Hughes. I don't think any of those guys, Brandon Graham, I don't think any of those guys are going to add anything more than what you already have right now. They're older. They're going to expect more money, and I don't think Kansas City is going to want to spend at that position. I think that they need to focus on trying to get younger at that position. When you start looking at the linebacker level, there's not a ton of guys out there that I would think that would really benefit Kansas City to go bring in. They already have Cochran, who gives them their fourth. Cam Jones is likely their fifth linebacker, and I think that they have to feel pretty good about that room. Not going to say that they can't draft somebody, but I don't expect them to spend money at that position. The one position that I would be interested in is safety. Is there somebody out there that they like, that they think that they can throw money at, that maybe they wouldn't be able to get and in the draft and do something with? Jordan Whitehead's really the only big name that's out here. Chuck Clark's out there as well, but he's a little bit older. So I don't think that they're going to be really looking at the safety position. I think that they're really pretty much done in the free agency period at this point. Corner's another one that we could look at. Asante Samuel Jr. is sitting out there. He's 26 years old. Could you give him a vetman deal to come in and play? Yeah, I don't think he's going to take it, but could he consider doing something like that? I think that that's possible. I don't expect them to do that. I think that they have to feel pretty good about where they are when their corner group, when you look at their corner group overall. That's going to be it for us today. We're going to be talking with Matt Derrick tomorrow. A lot more to talk about and getting ready for the NFL draft. Let me know what you think and what Kansas City could still do, who you would like to see them add, and we can talk about that coming up on Locked On Chiefs. Thank you all for listening today, and we will talk to you tomorrow.